Hey, folks.
Hello.
Nisha, I'm sorry I took so long to give you a review on that proposal there. I just realized that you had updated it a long time ago.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, for my time constraints, I have to leave at 35 after also, so we'll see what we can do. So the only I see the only agenda item was the proposal E updates, which I put on this morning. Brandon, I saw you just merged it, so not sure how you'd like to proceed.
We can always take issues or put up another PR on top of it.
I guess there's two. I guess that, kind of think about it is there's two approaches to think about it. We've started discussing what it looks like to submit back to the OCI. I guess it's a combination of the TOB. You have to look, I think our working group reference types charter said to go back to the TOB. I actually don't remember. I have to go back and check. But I think ultimately they're looking for us to make a recommendation for what we'd like to propose. So part of that is not like, here's a bag of stuff, you guys decide. As here is what the working group went off and did investigations on and recommended. So I think from a proposal E perspective, there was some additional feedback that we were thinking, or that I was thinking, and I was talking to Sajay and Lockie. Oh, by the way, Lockie couldn't make it today. He had a conflict. He apologizes. He had something come up that he just couldn't make it. So do we want to discuss the additional feedback on E, or do we want to start framing what does the next steps even look like?
And I'll take additional feedback. I saw that Lockie was asking for an extra week for stuff to happen. I didn't see anything happen for a week, and so that's why it merged on today. I hadn't even looked at the notes for this meeting to see you want to talk about it still. I just figured had a bunch of approvals on there.
Yeah, I just made a comment, not realizing you had merged it, but it was basically what we talked about last week.
Yeah, and kind of thinking back, and I'll go look at the comment, but thinking back to last week, I am concerned. I want to make sure that we do address whatever registry operator concerns there are to make sure that we're hitting those. And if we span too far from where E was starting from, if we're looking for a lot of change in there, then maybe it makes sense to make a proposal F. And that way we can just sort out and say, okay, look, we at least saw this thing, we thought about this other thing, and between the two, we're going one direction or the other. And that way we can sort out that way.
I think if E is close enough, I don't think you have to fork it into F. I think we can just keep making changes to E. It seems like the closest one with the most velocity. I don't want to confuse us all with
too many
E
choices.
Potentially G. It's merged, but that doesn't mean it's set in stone. It's set in code. So I haven't personally been able to take a look at it this week, but just general vibe, it seems like people are on board with it. I don't know specifics of things that we're still discussing. I'm interested in talking about whether or not E is the thing we want to go with. Pin that for now. What is the practical? What are we producing to say that proposal X, whatever, for some value of X, is the one we are taking, or what are we doing, right? What is the result of this? I think we generally have an idea of we as the body of people working on this will come to the, I guess, TOB with this is the thing we want to merge into your various specs. Is that people's Do people agree with that as the thing we are doing?
So just correction, I thought that was community, not TOB. So we would present this in a community meeting that has representation from the spec maintainers.
Sorry. I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, right? Because we are going to make changes to distribution spec, presumably. We're going to make changes to image spec, presumably. And so or other new things, who knows? And so we'll need buy-in from those specific people. My impression of my year plus of history with the OCI is that the community meeting is not a useful forum for that. I mean, it's a useful place to talk about stuff, definitely, and by all means, we can talk about it. But like, nobody has any power to do anything, in my experience. So we should. I thought we would engage with TOB to say, hey, TOB, you are not distribution spec maintainers or image spec maintainers, but some of you are, and you at least have some like weight behind you to say like, well, not just this group of jokers, no offense, not just this group of jokers, but also TOB thinks this is a good direction. And with that weight, we can say, distribution spec, like, please let us know if there's concerns and we'll change things. But like, mostly, that's what I thought the next step was. But I don't want to prescribe that. I want to get an idea of if.
Yeah.
Do you have something to add? Go for it.
I think I agree with some of that. I think that from the conversations I had, and I think we talked in Slack a little bit, it doesn't sound like the TOB necessarily wants to do that unless they need to. And so if we have distribution spec changes, we should take those to the distribution spec maintainers. If we have image spec changes, we should take those to the image spec maintainers. If we want a new spec, we should ask the TOB. And probably, I think it would be great if the TOB would say, yes, this is the way we want to do it, and we were going to stamp our approval. I don't think that is something that they will do, but maybe there are people who are on the TOB or have talked to people on the TOB that think differently.
I think there's a coordination issue that I would like to head off at the pass, which is like some changes are clearly distribution spec changes and some changes are clearly image spec changes, but some things require input or consideration across the boundary. And so if we go to distribution spec first, for instance, and say distribution spec, we'd like to make this change, and they say go for it, and then we go to image spec and say we'd like to make this change, and they say, oh wait, but change this in a way that is incompatible with distribution spec stuff that's already approved, and now we have to like do I don't know, getting everyone on the same page is hard in my experience. And so that's why I thought TOB would be not like people disagree, just people aren't in the room together to agree.
Right.
That's why I thought TOB, but you're right. I think I have mentioned that they don't want to be like arbiters of decisions so much as like, that's the spec maintainer's job, but there's a coordination.
Exactly. And I think you're right that this is probably going to be difficult to do. But
design reason, it's just difficult for coordination and people getting in the same room together reason, which is silly. But anyway, there's a bunch of hands up. I don't mean to keep.
Is there any? I mean, could we get in the same room? Like, would that be a possible like next step?
Who's going to KubeCon?
Silly idea. Yeah. We need some relative quorum of distribution spec folks and some relative quorum of image spec folks, presumably. In the past, getting quorum of either of those has been difficult, but maybe if we just, trick them and promise them a car if they show up to the Zoom meeting, switcheroo on them.
We could promise them ice cream. We seem to have lots of that flowing around.
Yeah, but where's it from? What's in it? Sorry, Nisha, I keep jumping in. Nisha has her hand up.
Actually, Brandon had his hand up first, so I'll let him go first.
I'll jump in there. We were saying, does this need to go TOB or not? And the one area I think we do need to hit the TOB on is we're talking about a new spec for artifacts themselves, just a new media type that wouldn't be an image spec media type. So that's the one place you need to go to them to get a new spec created, I believe.
Yeah.
So the last meeting, community meeting, where I had brought up this quorum of maintainers, the response I got was that there are maintainers in this group that should be able to work on something. That would be used. So something could be proposed for either one of like the distribution spec or the image spec, depending upon what maintainer represents this working group. They could propose something and then say to the effect of in order for this to work, these changes to image spec need to be merged in as well, and we need a representative from image spec or an image spec maintainer to weigh in on it. Maybe we can start from there. Or I don't know. Josh, are you a maintainer of distribution spec?
I am. John is. I forget who else is in the group that could. But I have at least in distribution spec, I have the feeling that they know that we're doing this, and so there'd be a general kind of consent. I know Mike Brown is in support of what we're working on, so I think we've been doing this for a few months, and I think if we come to them with this, it'd be hard for them to turn that away. I can't speak for image spec. I guess where I'm confused is if we're already having this conversation, like where are we putting things? Does that mean that we're on the same page with what the thing is? Like no matter how we divide it, are we on the same page with proposal E, or do we need to go back to the drawing board and revise that? And
I think there's still
back to
some
the drawing
questions.
board. I think that there was some additional feedback. I think the question is we were just trying to figure out as we were framing, like very clearly, we were, at least for me, for us, with the ORS artifact stuff that we've been doing is that we purposely did not put a lot of feedback on E because I wanted to give space for others, right? Because there was a lot of discussions and so forth that came to that. So we just wanted to make sure that others had an opportunity to provide the feedback. There's questions around different, some are annotations, some are properties and so forth. There's paging. There's a couple other relevant questions, but the two basic pieces is changes to an existing spec, which there's a bunch of questions around versioning, regardless of what changes we're doing. There's a versioning question, and then for a new spec, what is the go forward path, right? There's the bridge, how we've been discussing it, and then there's like a go forward manifest, if we will. So I think we're just kind of fleshing out like what does that next step look like, because it'll help us prepare what it is that we're assembling to present. I posted the original working group charter that had some of this stuff called out.
I have so my opinion was that proposal E was the bridge, and it seems to me that in order for it to be the bridge, the bit about querying the registry, pagination, all certain, like actually a big chunk of filtering would have to be addressed in a follow-up proposal. And the bridge is changes to the image spec and adding the new artifact spec with some changes to distribution spec that addresses these two, like that compensates for these two, I guess, or no changes to distribution spec with regards to filtering. But that was my understanding. Is that wrong, or is it? Yeah, I'll put my hand down now.
So one idea, I have two things to say. One idea was, can we, for the first round, just drop some aspect of the filtering or the pagination just to like get it in? And then my second comment was, I agree, Nisha, that that was the bridge. And so I want to understand what are the, what are the things, whether they go to this spec or to this new repo, like what are the things that are keeping people from like being on board with that?
So to answer the drop in the filtering part, my go-to right now has been to say, let's get the stuff that people need to use this today with the existing registries, get that part committed. And that's specifically the reference type on the image spec and the description of the tagging syntax. And that will probably be over in distribution spec. So none of the API changes, none of the new specs, anything like that, because those are going to take time to sort out. And then the assumption there is that once we get the initial state there, we get to a status quo of, okay, people can use this. Thanks, Jason. People can use this as it is today and know that we do have this forward target. We can go through and work with people like distribution, hear concerns from Michael and other folks about what does this filtering thing supposed to look like. We've got some space and time to get that sorted out before we put those proposals up.
Yeah, just to give voice to that silent thumbs up, I think that's a very good approach. Both because we can make small steps we all agree on before tackling the potentially more hairy, thorny issues, and because when distribution picks up the changes, the small changes we all agree on, they may come up with other issues, other problems, other practical real world concerns, or not, right? They might say, oh, in practicality, filtering isn't as big a deal as we thought. People are completely fine with this in common usage. All of that is to say, I completely agree. We should, anything we all agree on, we should stamp it in stone while we still agree on it, and then keep agreeing going forward and stamping more stuff.
My only hesitation so far of not already submitting some of these requests up is A, to make sure that we do agree, but also B, any of the changes we're thinking of to how we're doing this querying and whatnot. Do we need to define special fields and those need to be pulled off externally? If we go down paths like that, that might change the things that we're proposing. The reference type descriptor we push up there might need additional fields in there. And so we might have something that needs to be modified. And so any questions, concerns we have on those parts now that we can sort out, sooner the better. And then we can save the other parts of how do we do some of the filtering on those till later.
How about we, maybe Brandon, you could share the spec and we can go through that now, like, or maybe spend the next few, the rest of the meeting looking at things that we feel we can implement, we can submit right away, and things that we think need a little more work or a few more steps to get there.
So I think I
Go
want to
ahead.
raise some questions there on this. So there's a question of what kind of incremental steps that we can make that fit the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish. Because I'm a little worried about, kind of Frankensteining this thing together. A spec is kind of laid out to cover larger scenarios, and I think it's kind of like the blueprint. Once you know the blueprint, then you can go build off certain parts of the house. You can put the garage over there and you make sure it's over far enough because you're putting something else in place, power, water, whatever the circumstances are. Without a full blueprint of what's going on, we already have a couple implementations out there. And I think we know some of the gaps that exist. So I'm not sure if formalizing those in some cases help, while other cases we've been able to drill into why filtering is important, why some of these properties are important. So I'm all for incremental steps, don't get me wrong, but I think you want to make sure those incremental steps are accruing up to something we're happy with in the end, and not just formalizing, here's a Frankenstein that we all formalized.
I can submit a counter proposal for that, Steve. if we are able to submit something that is useful but painful to users, that gives us an opening to submit more enhancements. I think Brandon had brought that bit up a while ago. Like, yes, you can do all of these things, but it's going to be slow and it's going to be clunky and cumbersome. And but that would then make the case for why these other improvements would be useful.
I know we keep on using this comment that it's going to take forever for things to evolve. I think it's our inability to make an agreement on some of these things to evolve. Like this is, if you look at what, we have an implementation that we have run forward with, that we have, learned a lot around why indexing, why the properties, why paging, why date sorting, and these things have come up. So, we've actually had this rolled out in ACR for a while, and Michael's, in his process for getting it rolled out. Zot's got it rolled out. So the idea that we can't make changes, if I look at Kubernetes, for instance, there's a lot more Kubernetes instances out there, right? Every cloud has thousands and thousands upon them that different customers run, where registries are a far smaller subset to those. So I want to be careful about assuming that we have to make minor changes because it's going to take forever. I think this is where the confusion that we've created has said others to say, I'm just going to sit back and wait. So
Well,
I'm not sure if that's
so-
really as much of a challenge as we say it is.
I disagree with that. I think some of the work that we're doing is influencing the wider community, and influence takes some time. I'll give an example. We created, like, see, I'm the maintainer of the Turn project. Turn has has funky to pin Docker files. It's been what, 5-ish years now since Turn was released, and it's only now that BuildKit is trying to implement the same thing. It took 5 years to get that point across, plus several supply chain attacks. So I think it's a matter of just, yes, there are many projects that have that long-term vision and can see, can foresee all the problems that will happen, but not everyone can. And I think, this is an opportunity to make them see that through example.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Nisha. I think it's a like minimum viable proposal strategy where get something that works, like you said, get something that works even if it is painful. Knowing that it is painful, improve it in the ways that make it less painful. I know that you have your implementation that is out and users are using, and I'm sure their feedback is useful and part of it, but I think there's every registry has its own use cases and usage patterns and storage limitations, and I don't know that they would all conform to the same constraints as the implementation that you have, is my worry. So that's why I want to do this slow incremental thing. The other thing I want to say is it's not like we have to cut a new version of the spec after each iteration. We can pipeline these, right? If we think that it takes some amount of time to do, we can get whatever we can into the pipeline first, and then start the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. They can overlap in the process on the way through, and then at some point when things settle and we think that it's good enough, we can cut a release of it. That seems like a lot more sane strategy to me than to build the whole cathedral and then stamp it as done once it's complete. Because it's never complete. That's the other thing about OCI that I want to drill into people's heads. It's not complete. It never has been, and it never will be. We need to work the muscles of moving it slowly but steadily, instead of big lurching every 6 years, a gigantic change. It's not a great strategy. That's all.
So, I mean, I wonder if we could instead come up with, a part of proposal E has has an upgrade path, and maybe, we ought to flesh out what that upgrade path looks like. What do we start with? What do we propose next? What do we propose after that? And I think Stephen Sajay's experience with actually going all the way and implementing this thing and iterating over it and finding out like what would work and what would not work would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely in the proposal where we say this is what we all like unequivocally agree on this. Also, here are some next steps we think are going to be, important and in the pipeline of stuff after this. That it's not part of the proposal. It's not part of the thing you're, ratifying, but be on the lookout for this coming next. Things like filtering, things like paging, things like, etc.
If you look at the scope of the proposal, basically the working group reference types proposal, one of the things was delivering a reference implementation to it. So I think that's one of the things that we should probably think through. And this is, just because we have our feedback from the way we've implemented it, it doesn't mean that others might have the same, right? Like the point is that, and this is why the discussion of where the properties exist isn't as much of a challenge as opposed to the code that supports it, right? Like whether it's an annotation or a property or something, that's not really super important. It's what really is, well, what is the code that knows how to index it and return it? How do you track it for, lifecycle management? So I think this might be one of the places where we can start implementing a proof of concept of it. We've got a bunch of it done in distribution, which could, since the proposals are really centering around, the point here is we have some debate around some where the properties live, but that's my point is that's not really the hard part. So if we took we could take distribution, we could take Zot. There's lots of different things that you can take as an open source project and start implementing it. I think we'll start to flush out the details of, all right, this does really matter now. Oh, we can do this later if we just add this property now. I think that's the piece that kind of makes it more concrete, because I mean, a spec is a spec, but a spec is only interesting if it actually has an implementation that justifies it actually works.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially if it's in our charter that we would produce such a proof of concept. Is there anyone on your side that is doing that? That is like tracking? I don't know. The elephant in the room seems like we are consolidating around proposal E. I don't want to say it because I'll scare it away, but it sounds like we're getting close to some form of proposal E. Is there anybody who is interested in prototyping that for in distribution or in Zot or in a clean room registry implementation or anything, to be able to start fleshing that out so that we can say, this is the thing? Josh raised his hand. I don't know if he meant to.
Yeah, I can work with Zot or something else.
Okay.
There is a lot of work already in distribution for this, so there's a good base of it. We use distribution to validate our initial designs to make sure we were comfortable with it, and we pivoted quite a bit. One of the reasons it's not sent as a PR up to distribution is, as we've learned, we wanted to go back and change some of the implementation in it, and Sajay could remember the details maybe. But I think that is what's really important, is to, until you start building something, you don't really learn enough to know, is that the blueprint you want to, create and make 1,000 copies of. As far as E or A, I mean, E, I see really as the properties are named a little bit differently from A. The big difference in E is there's properties on an existing manifest. And I think that's the piece that we want to flush out. Again, from a versioning perspective, what does it mean to really add? Not does it break anything? It's more a matter of what expectations are set by adding those properties. So I think doing some kind of incarnation of that with, and I don't really care if it's distribution or something else. It's just, I know there's a lot of code there in distribution that's already there, and distribution has been the base that most projects tend to start with when they build a registry.
So, so I want to jump in on that because you've raised the question a bunch, but it's ambiguous to me. Which versions are you talking about? And then what is the decision criteria for you about if we do need to modify the version? I'm assuming we're talking these two lines here.
Yeah, so I've always found it interesting that we want to ignore schema version 2, but it does say schema version for JSON. So I always find that interesting. And then there's the image manifest.v1. So I will leave it open because I think that there's interpretations for both. But my point is, let me just, the one point is, if there is, when a registry is ingesting a manifest, right? Registries don't really care what the blobs are. Right? We don't really crack blobs, but we do crack manifests to understand what does the thing reference. So when there's new properties and there's annotations that they're expected to do something with, what does that mean to add something, and what is the expectation of a registry? Not just that the distribution spec says, hey, ignore things, because we've debated that one before, but how does a registry say I comply with?
So to go back to the decision criteria here, because I think that's what we're talking about here is this sort of decision criteria. If a registry receives this today with this version number and doesn't know what to do with it, is that okay? And so, these are the criteria I'm trying to sort out, is what scenarios will we have where we say we need to bump this version number? And so that's what I want to clarify.
At least my understanding, and again, I might be missing something about proposal E, having not read it very recently. My understanding is that proposal E, at least, is backward compatible for existing registries. An existing registry can accept a manifest that includes a reference field. It won't know what to do with it. It will ignore it. It will not do anything. And when you ask for references for a thing, it will say 404. I don't know what that means. Go away. That seems non-breaking to me in a way that means we shouldn't or don't need to, and therefore shouldn't bump any versions, either in the schema version or in the metadata, sorry, the media type.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you there. And so I just want to make sure that Steve's on the same page with all of us on that one.
Okay, yeah.
I don't want to be the one who speaks. I mean, Michael's here from AWS. I'm trying to see if anybody has to run other registries, but there's, if a customer, and I'm saying customer, right, instead of just a user, a customer that's paying money and has SLAs, if they upload something, what is their expectations? And when they delete something, what are their expectations, right? The example that I think I've used a couple of times is if I set attributes on a file, when I delete the file, I expect those attributes to go away, right? It's not like the file system knows how to track attributes separate from a file. So there's just a question of what is the end goal of the user experience and what is their expectations if they start sending something up that says subject or reference, whichever, and then when they try to delete something down. So, and I have to drop because I have a hard stop. So I didn't mean to queue this up. It was supposed to be 35 after, so I was expecting it to be.
We
actually also have to run, but this has been super useful, and thank you, everyone. I think we'll probably pick up next week.
All right.
Feel free to keep talking, and we'll catch the recording whenever it goes up.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I have to drop too. Sorry.
We'll have to pester some people for getting these recordings posted.
All right.
Okay.
Just
Who's
real
left?
quick before everyone goes. This is one of those things that Brandon and I've been trying to figure out, which is this version bump thing. If you recall, like version C, like proposal C had a version bump of 3.0. And my understanding of that is that if you bump it to 3.0, then registries can indicate that, what you're asking of me, I don't know anything about it, go away. But you had mentioned that there was an extendability bit that says you could use the same version if you follow certain rules.
Yeah, the thing we've kind of leaned really heavily against is this one little bit of the image spec that just says, hey, if you're reading or processing this stuff, you can't generate an error if you see an unknown property. And so if you're a server that's processing this and you see an unknown reference and you're not programmed to interpret the reference field, you can't generate an error from that. And so the recommendation is that you must, it's not even an option there, you must ignore that property. Doesn't mean you change it, it just means you ignore it. You don't do anything special with it. So we've been leaning really heavily on this with the hopes that as long as we follow this, we don't have to version the spec. And
Yeah.
I have a strong fear of versioning it. So that's where I jump on that one. Go ahead, Nisha.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask Sajay if he has any thoughts on that. Like in your implementations, have you seen any anything that goes against that for registry?
Yeah, so a couple of things is one portion that we recently faced was the vulnerability with missing media types, right? So properties, even though we expect registries not to look at them, we do look at them. That's the only way we can index, annotate, and kind of find out what the architecture is and things like that, because people want to see that kind of data when they come. So the extensibility is, it's okay to use, but it'd be good if we could limit some amount of structure to what the schema is. But then again, that's changing image spec, not the distribution spec itself, right? The other, actually, I had some minor questions. During the last OCI call, Mike Brown actually mentioned to kind of leverage the extensibility API. So I'm a big proponent of that. So that's why I wanted to kind of see if we can kind of like move proposal D or E or whichever it is to kind of like start with the extensibility proposal. There was also a question of whether we've done the work to support the extensibility API. There are folks from my team who's kind of like supporting getting a draft PR out with an extension support. Right now, though, but the base can be used for adding the reference type as an extensibility also, kind of like supports the entire plumbing for configuration into distribution and things like that. So we can kind of leverage that if folks are interested to take a look at it. Those are some key points. One point, like I know the key folks who are interested in this not there, and maybe they'll watch the call, that I wanted to make was, can we pivot on all the options of backward compatibility as if you do not have support for this new latest greatest thing that we're supporting, then this is the path you should use, rather than pitch the backward compat client scenario, tagging scenario as the first part. Like, send the customer down the approach, and yes, so that they know exactly where we're going, rather than pitching, stick it into reference first and then look at the artifacts. So that is one thing that I would like to kind of like debate. Do we have an option to show them the way, but hey, here are all the stopgap solutions that you have, because that's kind of how we've always done APIs. Like, if you want new APIs, use this, but if you're stuck with the old and what it is as an implementation, then you can use the other one. Because I read the spec as go with image spec. Oh, but by the way, there's also artifact spec. Instead, I would like to read it as, hey, this is the artifact spec that we're proposing from the reference type, which is the better way to do it. But given the current situation of things, this is what you can do, and you can leverage the tagging schema. Though that's the only kind of like recommendation I would like to make, because technically speaking, the entire backward compatibility is a recommendation in my opinion, right? It's how you can do it. Clients can build upon it, but there's no reason for clients to actually leverage that if they have this new API. So those are probably the 2 points that I want to make. I'll add it to the notes, but I think that's one thing that I wanted to kind of bring to the table.
Yeah, so you went a lot of places there, and keep going with the notes because I'll probably forget some of these things. I try to jot down a little bit of the points there. One on the unknown properties, we've kind of got that already today. If we're in any specs out here.
Yeah, I don't have any
And
concern with the unknown properties, because I know that folks stick in whatever they want to, right?
Well, not only that, but we've got optional properties today. And so you'll have annotations today or you won't. And so the registry, it's looking for annotations. If the annotations aren't there, it just works as if they're not there. It's an optional property. And so I look at us adding another optional property with the reference. And so if the reference isn't there, that's okay. If it is there and it wasn't expecting it, that's also okay. And so I think we've hit all sides of that one. And so I'm hoping we're okay, but I still hear some concerns from some people. And so I want to make,
maybe I can give you a selfish reasoning. I don't want to implement references over image spec. The reason is that if we are supporting artifact spec, then we can tell customers to go down one path. Right? When you're writing client tools, you don't go down both. So we kind of like totally ignore the image spec implementation. If they go down the image spec, my thinking was use tags, use all the backward compat tools. Don't even bother with using the API. So you have two clean paths of the new way with the artifact spec with the filtering API, or the old way is use a property that which is leveraging the extensibility feature for image spec. That's what I was hoping we can kind of like talk about.
Yeah, my fear with that is we're going to have a very long runway until we switch over to artifact spec. Just knowing that there are going to be a lot of registries out there that aren't updated, and so people are going to be hesitant to use the new feature until
I
it's
totally
support
agree.
everywhere.
Right. I mean, but
And-
you can see like the same thing with Runc, right? Like you have OCI runtime as a specification and you have Docker as a specification. There's going to be some fragmentation. But we're not stopping them from actually using that. But I don't want to, I mean, my hope is that the working group doesn't recommend that as the first option.
I don't think that's what we're proposing over here. In fact, I think we are trying to build up to a place where you want to be able to tell customers here's this newfangled thing and it'll be so much better for you. Just go use this tool and it'll all be nice. But there is like a place in the middle that we have to like move carefully so that rather than a like steep deviation, we want a gradual deviation. Like we want to be able to allow people to like slowly switch rather than have the fragmentation like you see in like in Docker and Rocket and all those other things that happened before. So we're trying to actually, rather than have it where the specification is based on Docker, but we want it the other way around, like the Docker needs to follow the specification or Runc needs to follow the specification. And my feeling is that the only way to do that is to make the increment.
Oh, you muted yourself, Nisha.
I am done.
Just cut off right there. Okay.
With regards to the second concern, Sajay, that you had, I think proposal E, meets that, because there are some things in proposal E that says, like, for backwards compatibility, you have this tag naming convention, and if you're going to switch over to this new manifest, then you are able to do all of those things with this new image layout or this new artifact layout. Maybe it could be worked differently in the final proposal.
I think actually Samuel's statement of the artifact repo is not a specification. This would literally, like, the backward compat would not be a specification in that sense, because we're not changing anything. We're literally kind of like leveraging existing APIs and trying to use it in a particular way, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to ask is, like, is that might be the path, and how much of that is a spec would be the question at that point in time. I'm trying to make sure that if we do call that out as a specification, we should be able to validate it also in some way. And how do we validate something like that from a client tooling part? That's all client implementation also. The entire backward compat story is a client implementation. There's no server change. So those are kind of things that I wanted to kind of like tug upon, right? If we are saying this is a spec, what are we changing? Or rather, are we just leveraging the existing specification with a usability pattern, which is maybe not a specification per se? So where do we want to draw the line is the other question that I would have. One more point I probably wanted to kind of like discuss was Laki mentioned about a couple of things that we want to probably take forward, which is the fact of actually, if we recommend the spec repo, what do we put there? We need to identify that. I don't think creating a new spec or anything like that is a challenge here, but just kind of like acknowledging that the changes to image spec is not a change per se. It's a recommendation of how to use the image spec in composition with tags, right? That's kind of what we're proposing, because there are no changes there per se. And so what the changes are is the actual changes to distribution and to new artifact spec, which is not a change to image spec at all. So I know, like, being able to, yeah, go ahead.
So we're going a lot of different places there on the what is the new artifact spec. I think it's just going to be this. It's what the artifact spec is here, and we just need to go through and write that in spec language. So
Right.
This right here is what's going to go into the new artifact spec. To the comment, we should pull out reference from image spec, and we shouldn't do that. I know probably been a little while.
I think
going back and forth. The concern I have there is we get rid of this intermediate stage.
No, I don't think I'm not. Okay, maybe I came across wrongly. I don't think we should not support backward compat. I mean, I definitely am not gonna. I'm not going down that. What I'm saying is that just teasing apart for the specification, this is what we propose, and for all backward compat story, this is how the recommendation would be. Might be one way to take this forward. But then again, like when you start proposing it to the distribution group and the image spec group, we'll see what happens. Because I don't even see why we should propose this to the image spec maintainers, because we have a field there. Or are we saying that this is how
we're adding a reference field? So are we adding this field or not? I think that's the question. I think you were saying earlier you didn't want to add it, and I was saying we didn't. So I want to hit that conversation still. I'm not done with that one.
Okay, so I don't want to support tooling for two things. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
I would like to have one customer base, and I don't want to go scan back millions of manifests for this property exists, and so it should show up in the API or some weird situation like that. That's why going back to an old image spec is going to be hard. Like when you have like tons of data, cracking open the manifest and looking for something is a really hard thing versus supporting a new path.
Okay.
But clients are free to use that, right? That's my concern. That's what I wanted to probably bring to the table.
Yeah, hopefully there won't be too many old ones to do this, but that is a good point there. The reason I'm pushing for this though is that it gives us this intermediate state, which is that clients can work in a place where they're going between registries that do and don't have this field.
Right.
But they still want to be able to leverage the new API when they can.
That's where I have a concern. Like you're pushing an old manifest and expecting it to show up in a new API. That's exactly the challenge that I want to probably like solve, because if we end up getting one through this API and the other through that API, and then you say that, hey, you have an artifact spec and you have a new manifest spec, and they both show up in the reference API. Should we support that scenario? My take is no, because I don't want to go back and look at possible manifests that have been pushed in weird situations. But that's again, it's a consensus building thing, right? Like if everybody says yes, let's go do it, then I'll agree. Okay, let's go do it.
It's a good concern to raise. I wish this would have been a good thing to say 3 weeks ago. But looking at this, I think this is going to be a very long time frame here. I don't think this is going to happen overnight. They're going to be a long while for us to get the long tail of registries that are out in the field. I don't know how long Docker Hub mentioned they had old versions of Artifactory out there that were hammering Docker Hub when they introduced rate limits.
Yeah, I don't even think Docker Hub supports changing the media type. The config.
Well, Docker Hub doesn't, but I'm saying Docker Hub experienced loads of Artifactory servers that clients were running. So just assuming Docker Hub isn't even part of the problem here, you've got end users out there in the field that have versions of registries that were installed 5 years ago and haven't been touched since. It's going to take a long while.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say that you can use this, but you don't expect it in the new API also, because you've gone down an old path, right? So as long as you've used the reference field, go down the tag path. That's a recommendation that we support. But if you're using the new API, then you need to expect support of the new manifest also. So at least bundle them together so that that's a closed set. Like just, I want to keep them Turing complete somehow, where I can reason with this part is done, this part is all old. not maintain two client code bases to support old and new. But I see that interoperability would be a challenge. Like you talk to an old registry, and if it doesn't have the API, I can assume that everything is an image manifest. I don't have to worry about handling the new manifest also. Sorry,
Yeah.
Nisha.
So, yeah, go ahead, Nisha. I've been jumping into.
Yeah, I just want to ask a real quick question to Sajay. You said that you don't want to maintain two different clients. Why are you maintaining two different clients?
So when you tell, okay, let's look at a real customer scenario. Let's say you have a tool or something that actually talks to the registry, and it has to understand a certain set of manifests. If we have to understand both the reference manifest with the signature or like any reference like that, plus we have to understand the new manifest, you have to double the cost of maintenance. You have to test it, you have to validate it, you have to patch it, you have to keep it, it's just cost wise. So that's more like the reason. Writing two pieces of code that looks at both is really cheap, but maintaining that is expensive. And we have to deal with support costs also, right? I see the manifest, but it's not showing up in the API. That's a clear support call that I see. And I don't want to kind of like talk to a customer saying that, hey, the specification says go this way. But we need to kind of like make sure that your image shows up in both. That's the reason why two code paths always kind of make me nervous. Because I sit on support calls like this, like, hey, the manifest is not showing, what's happening here? And then we geo-replicate it. So look at this from, maybe I can pull in a specific example. If we replicate this across, we need to make sure that this reference is available across APIs in different regions as well. So you have to have two implementations on the client to be able to understand the new and the old manifest. Plus, you need to have the server to understand the new manifest and the new API. And the old manifest and the new API. So it just, if you kind of like look at the possible combinations to test and validate, that's going to be just cost.
Okay.
That's all.
So you're using, you're not like saying, oh, we have this client that can work with the new manifest in the new registry, and we have this other client that can work with the. I mean, you don't have a situation where you just have one client that works with the new manifest in the new registry only and doesn't have any kind of idea of what the old stuff looks like. Why not just recommend Docker or any of the other like existing clients to the customers?
Sorry, I didn't follow.
So you were saying that you maintain two tools, but in my head, I feel like the use case is more like, if you happen to be using existing tools, then you can use the existing tools in this way. But we would recommend using our brand spanking new tool that works with the brand spanking new registries. Is that not what the path is?
That
is what I would think is the majority of the path.
So maybe the easier question to kind of clarify some of the concerns. Sajay, when do you expect we're going to get to this last state?
I was with the extension proposal for 2 years. So, I don't see that immediately happening with interoperability, but
that also means the first time we're going to really test this API that we push out there might be 2 years from now, right?
I think we should. Okay, here's at least from my side and my team, maybe I can comment. We want to support getting this into distribution as much as possible, so that at least core distribution has some portion, like either through PRs or through supporting reviews or talking to maintainers. And that is one of the, I think, the comments that I wanted to address in the OR aspect also. If we get this fast, it would be great to unify on that. I don't think there's a challenge. We're kind of like mixing up roadmap and timelines, right? So timelines for this is probably going to be slow, but I think what I want to do is in the specification, like when enough registries support the new media type, a transition can happen to those media types seems like
Can
we
be.
acknowledge that this will take like forever, rather than that this is the path that we are laying forward. If you cannot use this, then until you can use this older thing would be a better, is
If-
my statement.
The thing is, if
So-
I'm the producer of an artifact, I don't want to do this until 95% of my end users have upgraded their registry servers. And so if I'm producing this artifact, I'm going to keep sticking on the old version with all the tags and everything, probably 4 or 5 years down the road. And so this really
Brandon-
holds back the adoption of this, is my fear. Go ahead, Nisha.
So my sorry about interrupting you, but I just want to really quickly say that this is the reason. I mean, this is the argument for bumping the version spec, is that clients are able to clearly delineate what is supported and what is not supported. So
Yeah, the
it's
challenge is
almost
as
like
soon
you
as we
have two different namespaces.
bump this, we break all the clients. That's to me, it's not even a question. It's we do.
Not bump. You mean if we change schema version 2 to schema version 3, that would break all the clients?
That would break the clients. Manifest V1 would break all the clients. They just don't know how to handle the newer version. And so they would all reject that new data object. And so you would not have any backward compatibility at that point.
Okay.
And so at that point, you're looking at a hard upgrade. So you might as well go straight to artifact spec.
yeah,
I think none of
Yeah,
the
that
scenarios
makes sense.
actually, so if you look at the use cases, what client would break if we were to stick in a reference in it?
I don't know any clients that are going to break if they stick a reference in it. I know clients that will break if you change that media type.
Right, but no client today uses a reference, right? So the whole reference type is a new type of artifact. It's not a container. So I would expect only container clients to break, like runtimes to break. What specific client would break otherwise?
Okay, rephrase the question. Are you asking what clients are going to break if we add a reference, or what clients are going to break if we change the version number?
Yes, what clients would use a manifest with a different version number?
No clients today would use a manifest with a different version number. That's why they would all break.
So,
No,
I mean,
okay.
but we're specifically talking about the image spec. Let's say that we don't touch the image spec at all, but we introduce the artifact spec, and that has different version numbers and whatnot. That doesn't break the clients, does it?
Once you go to artifact spec, you're on a different media type, and those all have to be upgraded
Yeah.
clients to handle the new media type. But if you
Yeah,
want to work with
that's
existing
okay,
clients
right?
today and not modify an existing client today, changing that media type breaks things.
I think it would be better to call out what is an example of an existing client that can use this, right? That's what I'm struggling to see. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
so-
see Docker or OCI, any
So-
of the, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give you the code right here, which is looking at, here is, what is the Docker 2 media type and a case statement here. And then it goes through and handles that for copying images across registries, and it's looking for that specific media type version number. So this says, if you're not matching these specific media types, you drop down here at the end and it says it's an unsupported media type. Does not know how to handle that code. And so
Okay, but
I need the media
what-
type to be matching, not break clients.
What
But-
would
Yeah.
stop someone from making a client that would support that the artifact media type and understanding the artifact media type along with the image media type?
Nothing, but that's state 3. I'm trying to get to state 1 right now.
No, but Brandon, the client that you have there doesn't support reference copy. It only copies the manifest. You still need to handle it by looking at the reference and copying that descriptor also.
So for that
It's
one,
not a
it's
complete
handling
implementation.
tags.
Right? Sorry?
That one would work off the tags. So if it sees the tag, it could pull the tag over.
So we're over time. I think Brandon, we found the area that we may have a conflict on, which is,
Yep.
do we stay with the extension and what would that break versus if we bump the version and what would that break?
I'll
Yeah.
I think we're out of time as well. I'll add to the notes. I just want to probably like see if we can absorb the extension part of the API, and the remaining we'll just kind of come to some consensus with everybody else.
Yeah, on the extensibility API, I also had comments over there. We kind of threw a whole bunch of things out there all at once, and I didn't get a chance to hit them all. I've got more time if you want to keep going for more time, but if you've got a hard stop, then let's go ahead and call it.
I'm late for the
Well,
next one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you, Brandon, I really wish I could write code for this, and I just don't have the time.
Yeah, well, I have to write the code for some of this stuff, and so I want to make sure that it's going to work.
Awesome. So I'll see y'all next week then. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.